ask Congressman Walberg some questions. And Tim, thank you for coming this afternoon. Before we get started though, we need to go over some of the rules this afternoon. If you didn't get a chance to, you probably noticed there were some pink cards over on the table. And I must ask this afternoon, if you'd like to ask a question, it must be on a card. So, questions must be submitted using this card. Question card must be completed with the required information. There are a few things on the front side. When you get those cards filled out, please turn those into one of the staff here. For safety and visibility of all attendees, no sign shall block the view of another attendee. Well, right now I don't see any signs, so that's not going to be any kind of problem. Individuals who interrupt, disrupt, or interfere with the orderly conduct of this event will be asked to leave. So, with that, I think if there's anything else to cover, I'd like to welcome Congressman Walberg this afternoon and welcome all of you for attending.
Jim, thank you. And we're glad to be here in Palmyra. Don't do too much of that, I'll get used to it. It's great to be with you. And we haven't had, I think, only one time where anybody had to be removed. And so we haven't had to worry about that. We're Americans, and we have differences of opinions and different ideas at times. That's part of America. We don't worry about that. But we're still Americans, and I think we can find unity there. And with what's going on all around our country, I think that's one of the most important things we certainly need to develop. That unity with the diversity and willingness to smile a bit as well. Still a great place. I think as far as the cards, what we're going to try to do with the size of the group today, I think see how it works. We've done it a number of times already, where Jim will just read the name and the basic topic, and then if the person that matches that name would like to give the question himself or herself, that'd be fine. If you don't, Jim will read it, and that'll take care of that. Yesterday in Jackson, our town hall yesterday afternoon, we went through all the cards and finished it up in an orderly fashion and had time to just open it up as well, so we may have that also today. So we'll see what happens. A lot of things, if you've been reading, have been going on in our country. Everything from trade policy, threats of tariffs. Most of that hasn't taken place yet. The talking is going back and forth, the threats that are there. We know that living in an agriculture community, a major concern about the tariff situation is that it would have impact in ag. I was with soybean farmers the other day, as well as pork growers and pork processors, and there is a real concern there. China indeed imports from the United States a lot of soybeans and a lot of pork. The new pork processing plant over in Coldwater, which is an amazing plant, had a chance to take the Secretary of Agriculture through that plant earlier this week. And it is, there's nothing like it in the world. It is literally the most, sorry I'm moving there. I don't want to stay out of your tracker away. I'm not trying to do that, but.
I'm not tracking, I'm just taping.
We always have trackers with us, and get used to it, folks.
I'm not a tracker.
People track us all over the place, and we expect to see some of the most interesting facial expressions in the coming campaign as a result of that. But that's America as well. They can do it, and you just remember where it took place. The pork producers are concerned. This Clements Food Group plant processes about 8,000 hogs a day, which is amazing. They get up to this full two-shift potential. They'll do upwards of 18,000 hogs a day. 26% of what they produce there is exported. So their concern is great about what's going on. As I've said, I'm not a tariff guy. Free trade, fair trade is where I'd like to see it. But tariffs can be helpful at times, kind of like the hammer or the stick, when necessary to make sure that the trade policies are followed and the agreements that are made are carried out on both sides of the equation. And if not, then a short-term targeted tariff may indeed come in handy. I'm hoping, and that's the expression that a number of us have sent to the administration, that we would like to see it short-term and targeted. And thus far, targeted has been pretty close to what's been done. Right now, for the most part, the only remaining trade partner that we're having concern with is China. But that's the biggest trade partner. The EU, the major countries in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, of course Canada, and Mexico have been left on waivers without a tariff proposed on them. So we'll see how it develops in the time ahead. We know that sometimes disruption is necessary to get things back in order. And when it's been out of order for too many years, and frankly, going back several administrations, we've allowed trade policies to be not followed, I guess we'd say it that way, not followed by our trading partners to a great extent. And now the rubber's hit the road, and we have to stop that and make sure that we're the ones that come out to the best way possible for the American citizens, American taxpayers, and American producers, whether it's steel or whether it's pork or whether it's soybeans. We want to make sure that's treated appropriately. The tax cut proposal that we passed is still working very well. In fact, it's working better all the time. More and more people are coming to find out that it was actually true what we said, that it would impact in a positive way upwards of 90+% of the American people would see at the very least in their paychecks less federal withholding. And so that meant, as my wife informed me, when she took a look at the February paycheck, she said, you know, you didn't lie to me. There is less withholding. And so that's good. And we've had a lot of other people that have expressed that to me as well along the way. Businesses on the other side of the ledger, they'll be seeing more and more as time goes by. Again, the last time that anyone files under the old tax law is April 15th, 2018. That's coming up at the end of next week. That'll be the last time the old law is used, and from that point on, business and industry, corporations, individuals will all be under the new tax law. And so far, as I said, it's working out very well, with a lot of encouraging signs that speak to growth in our economy. The other issues that we can talk further about today that we're dealing with, the Omnibus, I'm sure there are a number of questions there that we can respond to, as well as what's going on relative to the gun violence brought to our attention with the Florida school and the 17 young people that were brutally murdered in a horrendous act. And of course the emotions, the pain, the grief that's gone on from that for those that were lost, as well as those that were significantly injured, and those that will be impacted, frankly, anyone in that situation the rest of their lives to some degree. Now what do we do about that? We've taken some steps prior to that event taking place, passed it in the House. Sadly, the Senate didn't finish it off, a nix fix, and subsequently saw the atrocity. Thankfully, we had that bill already, and they were able to put it into the omnibus, and so it's part of law right now. They'll add more punch, fill more of the loopholes in our National Instant background check system, as well as give a number of other things for grants and aid to communities, to law enforcement, to local school districts, for training, as well as grants for preparation of their school buildings, for whatever they deem necessary at any given school, as opposed to one size fits all coming down from on high at the federal level. Bump stocks have been put in the same category as automatic weapons now. But beyond that, it remains to be seen what develops as law enforcement, as local schools, as communities use the opportunity to do what's best for their students. Beyond that, I don't think I need any more introduction, so I think most of the cards have come in. You've had a chance to kind of look at them, so Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
I have, there's quite a few here. We have a question here, we have two questions concerning trade. The first question is from Bob from Ann Arbor. When Secretary Sonny Perdue was in Michigan this week, what reassurance did he give, what reassurance did he give Michigan farmers that the president's threat of a trade war with China was not going to have a negative effect on their incomes? Are you concerned about this?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about it. In my opening comments, I addressed much of that. Sonny Perdue received a good number of questions, as you might guess, when we're sitting in a pork processing plant with farmers that came from this district, who I brought over to make sure that they had an opportunity to meet with the secretary. Questions were asked on everything from milk, what's going on with that, the farm bill, but also on the tariffs, of course. And Secretary Perdue was very clear that he as well hopes that it is short-term targeted. He believes, I think it was quoted in the papers, that he said farmers are some of the most patriotic citizens in the United States, and he expects them to remain patriotic through this, understanding that this is a battle to some degree that we have to win, and there will be some disruption. But again, his counsel to the president, as well as other cabinet members, is let's do what's necessary. Let's think it through very clearly, and let's make sure it's as short-term as possible. I think historically, we go back to 2005, 2002, with other tariffs that had gone on a bit longer, and ultimately we lost about 250,000 of our own jobs. We don't want to see that happen. I don't think the president does either. And I hope that in the process of negotiations and at least up till the tariffs, it was well known around Washington that our president spoke with President Xi from China, back and forth almost weekly, and that there was a relationship that was developing of give and take and discussions going back and forth, and I hope that's the case now. The president, I think, clearly understands that his counterpart in China has a lifetime appointment. That was just taken care of. That is a concern. He has nothing to lose, at least politically. Now, we do know that if his people feel more and more heat than they already feel, and what's in Beijing is very different from what you see outside of Beijing with the people. Their lives are not free. Their lives are not rich. Their lives are very different than what you would see in the cities. And if it gets to a point where they feel the heat that comes from a trade war, it's debatable that even if you have a lifetime appointment as a monarch, whether that could be sustained with the numbers of people that are there. We don't want it to get to that point. And so Sonny Perdue was very clear that his counsel has been, we're willing to do what's necessary, but let's do it right, and let's target it, and make it as short-term as possible, and then have plans, at least behind the scenes, on alternatives that would give assistance to our agricultural community should this go on with China for too long.
Very good, thank you. We have a couple questions here concerning our troops being sent to our Mexican border. First one's from Paul, from Adrian. What is your position on sending troops to the Mexican border?
I'm supportive of whatever it takes to secure our borders. We gave the president in the Omnibus about $1.6 billion to start 90 miles. He had asked for 75 the first year. We gave him 90 miles, maybe a little bit more than 90. His concern is that while we get that started, we have an incursion moving up from Guatemala, Honduras, approaching the borders right now of over 1,000 people saying that they're going to come across the border. We've seen that in the papers, we've seen pictures of it, we've heard reports about that, and I think the president is cognizant of that, as well as the continued fentanyl and drugs that are coming across the line, and terrorist concerns as well. We know that this 90 miles of wall cannot be built overnight, so to give opportunity for our forces, starting out with the National Guard troops, who really are responsible with protecting the states that they serve in, whether it's from natural disaster or civil disruption that goes on, whatever takes place in the state, they are there to provide that protection. And so it's not out of the normal to expect that you would have a National Guard trooper sent down to protect a border. Arizona's governor has already indicated that he's sending 400 as a start, and there'll be a rotation that goes on with them because, as we know, our National Guard and our reservists all have jobs outside of their military obligations. We want to make sure that that isn't stretched too thin. They've been stretched pretty thin in going over to Iraq and Afghanistan for many years right now, and have performed an amazing function for our country. But I have no problem if Homeland Security Director and our Secretary, the President, and the military personnel that would make these type of decisions, as well as the governors of the states, agree to that. I think it's a suitable solution as the wall is being built.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears here just a little bit, something that might be a little bit closer to home. This question comes from Sharon from Blissfield. Where do you stand on guns in school?
I'm not a guy that wants to see guns in schools or metal detectors or barred doors. I want to see kids in schools in a classroom learning. I want kids to feel safe in schools. My 3 grandkids in the Elgin, Illinois school system, I want them to be there learning. I don't want them to worry about someone coming in and doing a mass shooting. But I also want whatever it takes to make sure any given school district is safe so those kids can learn and teachers can teach and both can go home at night safe and sound to be done. And that's why what we did with the Omnibus is put in place a grant that will be used for several things. One, for training school authorities, law enforcement officials, and others in how to identify problems and have plans on how to react to that. Secondly, grants can be used for hardening schools, whether it's a buzzer system with a video, or whether it's a buzzer system, video, and metal detectors, whether it's training individuals, whether they're school personnel or outside sources, on how to respond to an active shooter in a school situation, and training them and placing them in the schools. But it was passed in such a way that we give that opportunity to every local school district to make that decision on their own. What goes on in Blissfield is different than what goes on probably in Onstead, what goes on in Adrian, what goes on in Jackson, in Ann Arbor. All schools are different, but the same in that they're there for education. So my point is, number one, I believe we have a Second Amendment. It's still in place, which gives the citizens of the United States the right to keep and bear arms. And those that do that legally, we have no trouble with. And most people that do that legally do the registration when it's required, do the CPL course when they want to do that, and take the responsibility for that. We don't have trouble with that. The criminals we have trouble with. Some that for some reason or other become bitter and decide to take it out on other people, whether it's in Sutherland Springs Baptist Church, brutally killing 26 parishioners there, or at the school in Florida, taking the lives of 17 innocent students. and faculty, we have to protect against that. So that's the best way I can answer a question about guns in schools. I hope we don't have them in there, but I also want our schools protected.
Very good, thank you. This next question concerns the opioid crisis from Liz in Blissfield. She asked, what are you planning to do about the opioid crisis?
Do as much as necessary. We've done a lot so far. In fact, 2 weeks ago, just before we came home for the Easter recess, and I'm looking forward to getting back to Washington to rest up a little bit. It's been a full 2 weeks of town halls and factory visits and rotaries and Kiwanis and all of the rest, speaking to student bodies and the like. But we had almost 20 hours of testimony on the issue of opioid heroin abuse. There's a number of bills, including 2 of my bills that were part of that 20-hour session, that deal with various aspects of trying to get a handle on opioids from various aspects. One of my bills, for instance, my prime co-sponsor was Debbie Dingle, friend and colleague of mine from the other side of the aisle, but on this we see eye to eye. And Jessie's law is the bill that was put in place based upon the life and death of Jessie Grubb, who is a recovering heroin addict who was doing very well. Significant amount of time after going through a number of treatment facilities, was making it. Up here in Ann Arbor, having a job, moving further in her life, and was involved in training for a marathon. Had an injury, sports injury, relative to that, and needed a surgery. And her father and mother came up from West Virginia to the hospital in Ann Arbor. They informed the surgeon of her addiction. She informed the surgeon of addiction and asked that no opioid painkillers would be administered to her. It was agreed, it was put in her records. But when she was discharged, the discharging physician either didn't notice it or didn't take time to look and discharged her with a prescription of oxycodone. The next night she overdosed and died. This epidemic is an epidemic. The more I get into it, the more I come to understand that it's like none other. And you just don't change it overnight. The brain changes. And to get past that and to get it back into a setting that it's not controlled takes a minimum of a year. The average number of treatment facilities that people go through in order to break that addiction, and they'll say they're a recovering addict the rest of their life, but to get to the point where they can move on is 5 treatment facilities. They'll come out almost immediately, violate again. And so we're attempting to get a handle on that. Hospice is another area. Why do I say that? The person has died, but they've had various painkillers to administer compassion to them in their final days. If they're in a live-in hospice, like the one we have in Adrian, those pills stay in that hospice and they're easily disposed of. If they're in the home and there's in-home care, those are under the ownership of the individual who died. And the only one who has control of that now is the family members in that home. On the basis of that, we don't know where those pills go. And so my legislation would make it easier to have that decided before death takes place, and immediately those drugs would be removed from the home. To not fall in the hands of someone else, a neighbor kid that comes in a house and goes into the medicine cabinet, finds it, takes it out either to use or sell or whatever. These are all the things we're looking at. We're looking at law enforcement issues, training issues, like I said, multitude of bills to deal with it. Small town in West Virginia. We had the ATF in front of us for part of those 20 hours of testimony. And we really took them to task. One of the most egregious experiences was there in Williamson, West Virginia, a town of 3,000 people, small town in the hills. over the course of 10 years, without ATF catching it, 20 million pills were dumped in that town of 3,000 people through 2 drugstores until finally caught. That's the type of thing we have to get control of, to understand that yes, physicians need to be able to prescribe what's necessary. There are people who truly have chronic pain and need pain reduction abilities. And we need to make sure they are able to get those without all sorts of unintended hassle. But we also need to make sure that when we see a pill dump that takes place, or dispensing that's going on that's abnormal, or certain names come up of certain physicians that seem to be prescribing more and more from various people from different communities, we have to catch those things. And so those are some of the things we're doing in a bipartisan. I'm part of a bipartisan task force, in fact, outside of the normal function of Congress itself, that's looking at this and having hearings on our own as well to try to get to the bottom of it. The most discouraging thing about it, though, folks, is that there really needs to be a culture change in our society. There truly needs to be a culture change. Because if we get a handle on opioid, heroin, we're already seeing them using other things to give the same high. And going back to some things, methamphetamines, crack cocaine, all sorts of stuff. And that goes to the heart of the problem, the heart of an individual as well. What's causing that? That people are so lost in themselves, in their life, that they feel they need to have an outside influence to give them their happiness or relieve them of their pain. We have to look at that as well. And that's a community issue. That's a family issue. That's a church issue. That's an American issue that we have to take concerns with as well.
To go along with that, we have a question here from Mike from Blissfield. What is the status of recreational pot being on the ballot in 2018?
I think it's going to be there. At least I recollect. Look at my staff who are crack at remembering things. I think it's going to be on there. With all we're doing with opioid heroin abuse, with the numbers of businesses I go to who are crying for workers, not able to find people that are certified or trained for the jobs they have in the professional trades, etc. And then saying, when we find somebody, the next thing we're concerned with are their soft skills. Will they show up for work the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day? And will they pass the drug test? And so while America has a free society, and we like that, we're having problems with opioid heroin abuse. It's an epidemic. We have a problem with getting people who can pass a drug test and stay on the job. And now we want to make recreational marijuana something for us. I hope people think carefully through the process. There's no easy solution. I understand that. I understand that some are going to have it anyway. But, again, it goes back to the heart of the issue of what's happened to our society. We've been caught up with so much of this, as opposed to saying, hey, life's pretty good in itself. I have a job. I'm taking care of myself and my family. People see me to be responsible. I can make choices. I have incomes that I can provide good things for my life. And I want to get caught up with things that only make problems. That's not government's responsibility to solve, but we have to contend with it. And again, going back to the community, we need to draw together to work out those solutions.
Very good. Another change of gears. This question is from Linda from Blissfield. Do you believe in the structure of the Constitution that sets up a system of checks and balances and the separation of powers? Secondly, who do you believe you work for?
I work for the people of the 7th District. I don't work for Michigan. I love Michigan. But if it's a choice between voting for Michigan or the 7th District, and it doesn't violate the Constitution, and it's not fattening, I vote for the 7th District. I mean, that's 435 members of the U.S. House. We all have districts. I represent about 750,000 people. Not all 750,000 people agree with me, nor do I agree with all 750,000 people. But I try to represent the majority of them, according to the Constitution, the oath of office I've taken, and commitments I made to them. I serve the 7th District. There is a separation of power. If you read Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, you'll find out what is the most important branch of power, with the most power. Guess which one that is? Article 1, power. The Congress, the legislative branch. Why? Class? No.
They hold the purse strings.
They make the laws, they hold the purse strings, but that's a function. But why are they the most powerful? What was the plan? They represent the people. They represent the people. And in this country, the people are supposed to be the ones in power. The second most powerful is what? The executive, elected by the people. The third is the courts. They are simply there to interpret the law. That's it. We flipped it around over time. And now the courts tell us what to do. And I'm frankly getting sick of it.
Yeah. Yep. There's actually, the Constitution says that they do have the authority to say what is the law.
Yeah, they do. And we do too. Why? Because I take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution just as much as any Supreme Court justice. And I remember Antonin Scalia, rest his soul, sitting with him for an amazing hour session with him one time. Just 8 of us in the room. And him rehearsing the fact that Congress has a responsibility to interpret the law as well, to interpret the Constitution as well, to carry it out and protect it as well as any Supreme Court justice. In fact, Congress has, if you read, the ability to throw a judge out of office on one simple reason. There are many reasons, but it could be for one simple reason of misbehaving. And I've always felt that misbehaving was not following the Constitution. But in order to do that, you need a supermajority of members of Congress to do it. And I hope someday that takes place. When you see a judge, a federal judge, say that sanctuary cities are legal and can be controlled by the states, and the federal government has no authority beyond what they can drum up to enforce our borders. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see it happen someday. But no, I don't serve Donald Trump as president. I support him regularly. The policies are working. Hasn't been hard to support it. Like about 15% of the tweets to go away, but the policy has been great. I don't serve the courts. I don't want to get crosswise of the courts for an actual legal problem. But no, I serve the 7th District. I hope that answered the question.
I think it does. Thank you. Thank you. This next question is from Kathy from Ann Arbor. Do you agree that the free press is not the enemy of the people? You have advised us to get our news from several sources, and I agree. Could you please advise the president to rely on his daily news briefings for accurate information instead of Fox News?
Speaking with a number of his cabinet officials on a regular basis, I think he's listening to them. He still has the opportunity as president. He was elected. They've been appointed. He was elected by the people. And he's going to do what he believes is necessary to carry out his promises to the people. So we shouldn't be surprised with a lot of things he's done, including this recent tariff issue. He told us he would do that. He told us he would build a wall on the border. He told us that. We shouldn't be surprised. I think of the best way to answer that question as briefly as possible. first part of that again.
Do you agree that the free press is not?
Yeah, the free
benefiting the
press.
people?
You're talking about the Detroit Free Press? No, I don't think it's for the people. I say that jokingly. Smile, some of you, okay? I don't like the Detroit Free Press. I don't like their op-ed pieces. I don't like their commentary. I think it goes far left, but it is what it is, and a lot of people buy it. I don't like Detroit News a lot of times either. A lot of the media has just become amalgamated, where you really used to be able to tell when there was a conservative paper and a liberal paper, and kind of read in between. Isn't that way right now. But I think there needs to be a free press. And I think the free press needs to be a press that tells the facts. I remember joking with my, well, not totally joking, with one of my sons, who's a journalist for the Chicago Tribune. He's Pulitzer nominated, proud father. A journalist for the Chicago Tribune, came in runner-up for the Pulitzer Prize. But when he first started there, and I walked into the Tribune Towers in Chicago, and I saw the board with all the Pulitzer nominees and recipients there, and I said to him out loud, I said, boy, it'll be something when I see my son's name there as a Pulitzer Award winner. But I remember saying to him, now Matt, since you're at one of the major papers in the United States, for your old dad, help us conservatives out a little bit. And he turned to me and he said, Dad, you don't mean that. And I kind of looked at him as if to say, well, I might. And he said, no. He said, my training has been to get the facts, just the facts, and report them. And I said, bingo, that'd be good. I'll take that. That's all I ask. I don't think Fox does that regularly. I don't think CNN does that regularly. I don't think the New York Times does that regularly. I think to a greater degree today, your local newspapers do it more regularly than not, unless they're all AP. I'm almost tempted to say never trust AP at all, ever, but I won't say that. Smile, please. So I guess that's my answer. We need a free press. We need a press that takes on politicians, that reports the facts, that makes us sweat, that does investigative reporting. But how the press wrote on and spoke about the Omnibus even wasn't true. You all heard that Congress got a 20% pay raise? Yep, you heard that? I've not found it yet. In fact, the language in there continues our freeze since 2010. That's continued. But that was reported regularly. It was reported that we funded Planned Parenthood to the tune of $500 million. Any of you find that in reading the bill? Didn't happen. There's not a dime in there.
Did you read it?
I read it as well. I'm glad you asked, Paul. They didn't tell you the fact that the process of the bill was not to read 2,200 pages. We'd read that several times, especially those of us in the House. We passed a 12-bill appropriations package under regular order, out of the Appropriations Committee with amendments, a big debate, sent to the floor. 1,000 amendments were brought up for those 12 bills. Went to Rules Committee, 700 were confirmed to be allowable. Those are debated on the floor of the House, went on for hours and days. 2 of those amendments were mine that passed as part of that 12-bill package. Went to the Senate on time, on budget, on September 14th, before the end of the fiscal year at October 1. We did our job. We read those bills.
Before or after you voted on it?
One at a time, they came through. Wasn't hard to read it. And then the Senate, because of the filibuster, didn't take it up, still to this day hasn't taken it up. But much of that language was put into the first CR, the second CR, the third CR. We read those, and then the Omnibus. The Omnibus had the same sections, same items in it, except for a few additions. $700 billion for the military first year, $716 billion for the second year. I looked at all of the areas where you'd have the pro-life riders. Every single one of them was in there. I found no $500 million of funding for Planned Parenthood. I looked at the funding for Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, because I've been fighting for that along with my Republican and Democrat delegation from the Great Lakes states, including Michigan. That was in there. And a bunch of other stuff that I wanted to see. It kept me up till early morning hours. But that type of reporting is put out simply to divide people. And that's what they do it. And then people write things, letters to editors, talking about a pay raise that we didn't get, making it appear that Fat Cat Tim Walberg took that pay raise, when in fact it's still frozen since 2010. Is that on the question?
Yeah, is it true Congress only works part-time? How many days a year?
I'd love to work part-time. No, we work full-time.
How many days is that a year?
Close to 365 days a year. I had off this recess period, I had Good Friday, Saturday, Easter Sunday off, and Monday.
Are you typical to the rest of Congress?
I don't know. I don't spend time watching over them. But I know,
Are you watching over them?
I know most, well, their district better watch over them. My district sees me out and about. You see me all over the 7-county district.
Okay.
And I see a lot of you because you come to every one of my town hall meetings almost. So no, if you met my brothers and sisters in the U.S. House, Democrat or Republican, you'd see some of the hardest working, honest people you'd ever want to come alongside. You'd also see some crumbs. But you see that in society too, don't you?
Right.
We're a representative body. I've offered some people, shadow me for a week. See what I do, both in Washington and here. 5:30, the alarm clock goes off. 11:30 at night, I lay down on my air mattress in my office.
Is that
and go
a,
to sleep.
is that a real offer?
Appreciate hearing that. Why do we hear so much about them not working all the time?
Well, it's people like Sean Hannity don't spend time with us. He talks more about the swamp than he talks about what he should know. And I could say the same thing for the liberal side as well.
Is that shadow thing a real offer? Would you let one of us shadow you for a week?
That's a real offer. If you can keep up with me.
Okay.
If you can keep up with me.
Yeah, let me do it.
You supply your own transportation, you can follow me.
Glad to.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Okay, next question.
John from Adrian states, in 1947, the 22nd Amendment, Congress said power too long corrupts and imposed an 8-year term limits on presidency. Would you vote for an 8-year term limits for Congress also?
No.
Why not?
I'm not in favor of term limits for anything other than the presidency. Why am I not? I've read the Federalist Papers. Wiser men than me designed this government. We're gradually destroying it. But they debated that issue. They said the only way this government could survive is if the people keep in touch with what's going on in government. Keep in touch and hold the feet to the fire. They didn't use those words, but modern vernacular. Hold the feet to the fire of their elected officials. If the elected official does well for them, keeps the commitment in their oath of office, does their service according to the Constitution, then why would you throw them out?
Because I see many of them on TV sleeping when they should be working. There's many old people in Congress that shouldn't even be there.
Yeah, but you couldn't take them out anyway. You need to let their constituents do that. John Dingell was in for 59 years. For some reason, people felt that he was worth being there for 59 years. I was there for 2 years, and they threw me out. They term limited me. That's the way the Constitution was intended to work. That's the way the framers and founders wanted it to work, that people had to keep up. They couldn't just simply say, he'll be gone in 8 years, so just let it go. They didn't want government to get away over 8 years. They wanted you to keep track of what Walberg was doing this year so that you wouldn't keep him any longer necessary if he wasn't doing his job. That's what it's for. How much better do you feel the government in Michigan is working now, since it's a term limited legislature?
Poorly, terrible. I'm not happy.
It's not working any better than it was not when it was not term limited.
It's worse.
So again, it's the people's responsibility. It is not something to put on cruise control. It's not supposed to be an autonomous government. You're supposed to drive it. And I say that sincerely. You took me out in 2008, and the majority said, oops, 2 years later, put me back in. And they've kept me there ever since, with an increasing number of votes every year since then. Now that could change next year, but that's how government's supposed to work. I'm passionate about the fact that you ought to have a part-time Congress, you ought to have a part-time legislature, but you ought to have no term limits. That would force you to read the laws. That'll force you to listen to what your congressmen say. That'll force you more and more people to come to town hall meetings and let us get out of whack. Let's go to the next question.
Very good. This next question is from John from Petersburg. Due to the unique land use, agriculture, and because of the karst geology here in parts of Lenawee and Monroe County, the high level of risk posed by human, animal, and crop and ag water irrigation contamination from industry is a real concern. What steps would you be willing to take to prohibit deep well water injection in southeast Michigan?
Well, again, that has to be two key involvements. The local community that knows best of what's there and can be watchdogs for it, and the appropriate environmental protection agencies, whether it's Department of Natural Resources, the DEQ in Michigan, or where appropriate, the EPA. I don't have the expertise to know underwater ground resources. Dave, you and I have talked about that. But I know people who can do the research and can come up with the ideas. And I think it's a constant pushback. You know, we just heard about, I believe Nestle's was given the ability to take an unbelievable amount of water out of Michigan without even paying for it. Two concerns with that. One, not paying for it. And two, the amount of water that they'll be taking off when we've been fighting Wisconsin to keep from sending water from the Great Lakes past the limit that's allowed in law right now to a community further away. Why? You let that happen, pretty soon Arizona is going to be watering their golf courses with Great Lakes water. We're responsible for being stewards of our water resources. That's why we've joined together with the GLRI and making sure that's there. With the karst, and I had a chance to take a tour one day a couple years ago and looking at the formations. I think you were with us on that. And it's amazing to see the formations there in Monroe County. You think about the marshlands and all, and that being former lake bottom. There's some unique strata that's there, and I think we truly have to be cautious.
So,
Where a deep well might work, some other part of the state with a different pattern, a geological pattern, it won't work here. And that's where, again, the local community, the research being done there, and then the local environmental authorities making sure that they do
local
their job.
community don't have any power over that. That's federal. They don't have any say over what. You're a promoter of fracking, man. You
They have a
that's
lot of
injection
say,
wells.
they have a lot of say in talking with me.
Where's the injection wells? Where's all that waste coming from? It's coming from fracking.
Yeah, fracking
Most
is
of it.
working in
And
most
you're
places.
supporting that. You're a big promoter of
I
Nexus pipeline.
I support where fracking works. I don't support it where it won't work.
Well, that
We ought to be
millions
thankful.
of gallons of water. You talk about water. That fracking is a huge polluter of water, and that's why they're looking for
Paul, I'll
injection
tell you
wells
what,
all
I'll give you a
over the country.
challenge to prove that to me with actual stats. Don't just throw it out. Because over 70 years of fracking, we've had no verifiable response like you're talking about.
What?
Next question.
I don't believe, well, see that, now you won't let me talk. He won't ask my question.
Oh, he will.
No, he hasn't got, he evaded it. I can tell you right now.
Set it aside.
He set it aside. He won't ask my question. So that's why I'm over here.
Jim, did you set aside his
It was
question?
about trade. It was about
It's John
trade.
Kaufman, right?
Hmm?
John?
No, it was Paul, the attached.
Paul,
The
okay.
attached letter over there. That's-
This question comes from Mark from Blissville. Do you support the president's stand on climate change?
The president's stand on climate change. What is the president's stand on climate change?
Doesn't believe in it, came out of the Paris Accord.
Said it's a Chinese
Oh,
conspiracy.
I don't mind that we got out of the Paris Accord. That was a terrible accord.
Yeah.
It was a terrible accord.
The only country
That worked
in the
for
world.
everybody except the United States.
We're already doing
It said 30 years down the road, China may do something. When the pollution that comes from China, how many of you been in China? I have. I chewed the air in Chicago when I grew up. Literally could chew the air. I could chew the air in China 3 years ago and hardly breathe except for one day when the winds came in and we were able to see blue sky. Paris Accord? My gracious, the best thing we did was get out of that. Climate change is happening all the time.
Since 2000.
Since the beginning of the world. I wish that climate change would happen a little more quickly right now with warming. I'm tired of this being April in this
You
weather.
don't think these
funny.
extreme
It's
weather
not
events that we've been
funny.
having have anything to do with what we're doing?
There were
War in Syria is occurring.
There were more
It's not a
extreme
joke.
events
It's
that
not
took place
funny.
years gone
All
by.
you need to do is look at the available evidence. You want available evidence? Look it up.
We've looked it up.
You're full of shit.
I'm satisfied, sir. That's one. That's one.
Welcome to
You,
America.
you and I agree on the Tigers, but we're not going to talk that way.
President can.
If you're talking about people dying,
Yeah, I know.
you're talking about.
We're not gonna
ignoring
talk that
evidence.
way.
You're talking about ignoring the facts.
I'm not ignoring any facts.
Have you looked at the Arctic ice? You can go there
Uh,
every month and you can look and see where it sits.
Absolutely.
Every month you can tell
Absolutely.
that it is getting fewer and fewer miles apart.
Let's go on to the question. There's disagreements. There's plenty of scientists on one side, plenty of scientists on the other side.
98 or 99% to 1.
No, that's not true.
That's
You're,
fact.
you're not
That's
even
not true.
defining
Next
climate change
question.
correctly. You're saying it happens all the time, but that's.
Hey, folks,
it's
this is
defined.
America. Let's have our diversity, but let's go on here.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you again, if you have a question to ask, please fill out one of the sheets back on the corner. Okay, and I'll get to it as I can.
Did you get Paul's?
Yes, I do.
Let's get Paul's.
Here's next. Okay, Paul from Ottawa Lake starts out, statement from Donald J. Trump on trade. China's illicit trade practices, ignored for years by Washington, have destroyed thousands of American factories and millions of American jobs. Congressman Walberg, have you allowed China to destroy our jobs with your hands-off free trade policies? Will you for once support American manufacturing along with President Trump protecting our remaining middle-class Midwest jobs?
Thank you.
I've supported it.
You are now.
I am.
I remember having an argument with you back in 2006 when you.
You argue with me every time we're together. Paul, I love you, man.
I remember.
But we'll
we argued
disagree.
about this up there at Adrian.
We'll disagree.
Thousands of jobs, and you
I-
told me about the sinking boat theory. that you
I
had.
tell you what.
Shooting a hole in a boat and leaving, whatever. You know.
I
and
want
still lost
free
all-
and fair trade.
But you
But
gotta
I'm willing,
think-
as I said even today, when necessary and will be used in the right way. Obama wouldn't use it at all. He'd draw a
Well, I
line.
agree with that.
He'd draw a line in the sand and it would wash away.
Right.
This guy won't do that. Now, I'm
I
hoping.
want you on board with it.
I'm on board with
There's
it.
a lot of people in this area, in your district, that are farmers also. Yeah, you're for the farmers.
You bet I
There's
am.
a lot of people that work manufacturing. There's a lot of farmers that work manufacturing at one time to supplement their income. Their kids work in manufacturing. We lost millions of jobs, right? We lost 60,000 factories in this country, and you were for it.
You
Because
know-
I remember arguing with you in
You know,
Adrian
I-
in 2006,
now-
and
now-
nothing
now-
had changed.
Now,
since
don't
you've
put
been-
words in my mouth, Paul. Come
No,
on,
I'm
man.
telling you
I
the
love
truth.
you. But the fuller statement would always be, we gave away a lot of our own jobs by high taxes and unnecessary regulation, excessive unnecessary regulation. Since this president come in, he's cut out regulation, 14 congressional review acts, including mine, which was the 14th. reduced unnecessary regulation, we cut taxes, we're seeing jobs come back, we're seeing money brought back. Apple, for instance, bringing jobs and money back to the United States. Why? Because it makes sense for it to be here now. That has to go alongside
They had tariffs.
tariffs.
Huge
Only
tariffs. China had
tariffs.
tariffs on
Tariffs.
for
Tariffs will not cause the
Intellectual
problem
tariffs.
if we also have the ability to not have hurdles that we put in our own way. I've said even today, starting out, I agree with a tariff targeted short term. I believe that can happen. We have a president right now who the rest of the world blinked. China hasn't blinked yet. But I don't know what they're saying behind closed doors or on the phone on what the two presidents are talking about. I'm hoping that it's getting to the point that both of them will save face and both countries will succeed, and especially America. Let's go to the next question.
Very good. This question comes from Doug from Lansing. Will you be co-sponsoring HR 15, keeping the 6-day mail delivery service?
No. No. I think we ought to have the mail service that we can afford, that will provide the service necessary. I certainly support having, as it is right now, alternatives, even for a 7th day of mailing on certain necessary items that have to be delivered, drugs, etc., for people. But the U.S. Postal Service is broke. The U.S. Postal Service is going to leave some of the postal workers with pensions far less than they were planning on because it has been mismanaged for too many years. I don't sit on that committee anymore, but I remember having hearings with the U.S. Postmaster General trying to work out some type of agreement whereby we could extend the life as necessary for the pensions of the postal employees, but also be able to do the job that we expect to be done. We have to have a postal service. UPS needs a postal service. FedEx needs a postal service, and they ought to pay what's necessary to have the postal service carry their boxes to the last point as it's worked out. I don't know how many of you know that, but they work together on these things. But for too long, both the union and the Postal Service Administration were unwilling to get together and say, this is reality. We're going broke. And the American public isn't going to keep paying higher and higher and higher just for those benefits and not administer the agency well. And that's what's going to have to happen now, and I think push is coming to shove. And hopefully it'll take place so that we have a postal service. You know, I don't send anything to my family in Africa. It won't get there. And that's not even a check. It could be a box of shoes. It won't get there. We can send anything here, and it generally gets to our mailbox. A check, we could put a diamond ring in, and most likely it'll get there. We need that to continue. But for me to, as a legislator, to pass a bill mandating 6 days, when in fact we may need a time period when we don't have 6 days of delivery, in order to get our house in order again, and have the money to do that without spending it all, we may need to do what's necessary. So no, I wouldn't co-sponsor a bill mandating 6-day delivery. I'm willing to take mine for 5 days. Okay.
The next question comes from John from Adrian. Would you vote to put Social Security money back where it came from and then pass a law so Congress can't touch it again?
Not only would I vote that, I've sponsored the bill that sets up a lockbox for Social Security, that all of the funds that go into Social Security can only be used for Medicare or Social Security purposes, nothing else. They can't even be used to be a backstop for our spending in Congress. That's the trouble that's been there.
How did they do it in the first place?
Pardon?
How were they able to do that in the first place?
Invested in Treasury.
Lack of discipline, wandering hands,
Corrupt Congress?
and giving in to, well, we're talking about Congress. There's the only one that can spend it, right? But they're responding to citizens who are asking for things, and so rather than say, no, we can't afford that. Now remember, this next week or two, we're going to vote on a balanced budget amendment in the House. Be honest with you, I don't think the Senate will take it up. They don't take anything up, speak of. We've told our leadership we want to vote on it. I've co-sponsored that amendment.
You did?
We had it here in the House, the State House, and State Senate, and the governor. Now you can finagle through unique bookkeeping so you're not totally balanced, but you don't get as far out of whack as the federal government has. $21 trillion of debt. But I'm telling you that if the balanced budget amendment, which the president wants to sign, if it would ever get through, we'd have to say to some of you when you come to us, I want this project, I want this expenditure, we'd have to say, can't do it. Because we can't balance the budget if we do that.
So how does that affect Social Security and Medicare?
Those are mandatory expenditures, we can't alter that. That's part of the 60% of our budget that is mandatory, and the only way we can alter that is by law that a president will sign. And even there, across the board, we're going to have to look and make sure we do the priorities. Social Security is a promise taken from us involuntarily. None of us, well, I shouldn't say none of us, most of us have not contributed Social Security voluntarily. I know for a fact I could do better in Social Security and investing. And I did for a number of years where legally, when I was in the pastorate, I could opt out because of religious exemption. That isn't allowed anymore. But I've been paying the Social Security since then, but for those years I was out, I did better in my investing than the government did.
It's an insurance program.
We can still do that. However, we haven't had that opportunity. Social Security is promised to you and me. I'm on Medicare. I don't like it because that means I'm old enough to be on Medicare. But you better keep your promise to me. And I'm going to fight for that. The same with Social Security. But I'm also going to fight for the younger people who right now assume they will never have any Social Security. It won't be there for them. I'm going to fight to make sure they have something. And I hope we can make them, the younger people, even a better choice for them to be involved with in the future. But for the rest of us, it's a promise made, it's a promise that needs to be kept.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, is that correct?
We have a little bit. Before our next meeting, we have a little bit of time, don't we? I got a bunch of bosses, but we can go a little bit more.
Okay, first of all, we have a comment from Ed from Blissfield. He says, thank you for not supporting the privatization of air traffic control. The next question concerns, why not cut foreign aid by 5% and spend it on local projects?
Well, we have cut foreign aid by 17% over the last, help me out, 8 years, I think it is. Got to be careful how we do that. I think President Trump has made it clear that he'd like to see some other cuts to certain countries. Basically say, you're either going to be our friend or you're not going to get our aid. I like that.
How is it taking so long? for
Hey, wait a second, wait a second. We're sticking by the rules, okay? Foreign aid sometimes can be considered right alongside military defense capabilities. Because when we have friends who will truly be friends and work with us in a need, that's cheap military funding. When we look at countries like Pakistan, for instance, who we've given billions of dollars to in foreign aid, and yet in recent years have not shown themselves to be friends, in fact have hidden our enemies, and then decried the fact that we went in and got our enemy and took him out. And we've seen other situations like that. I was delighted when I heard the president say about Pakistan, you will either come alongside and start acting like a friend, or you're going to miss out on our foreign aid. And that can be said for a number of other countries. And so I think we need to look at all of them. And I think right now, they've been put on notice. It's been interesting to see what's happened in the United Nations when we have a UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, who's willing to step up to the plate and talk straight. And they're getting used to her. That's a good thing. We're the most compassionate, caring nation in the world. We've borne more burdens than any other country in the world. And we'll continue to do that. But it's time also to say, you have to show honesty to us as well, that you are indeed a friend. When I've gone to various countries in Africa and Europe, that's what I'm hearing from them as well. I remember hearing from President Museveni in Uganda, and they have been an amazing support to us in our war on the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. They've been on the front lines. But he said to me one time, he says, Congressman, it is good to see finally an administration that will talk strong, because we need strong talk in this world. It's too dangerous. And America has to be the one that takes that stand. Now that's why, when they had a chance to vote against, vote for something that Nikki Haley said, anyone who votes that way, we're taking names. Uganda wasn't on that list, and several other countries that we've had opportunity to meet the leaders of. So foreign aid can be very useful, but has to key in on our priorities. Only have to get the Monroe.
You haven't asked any of my questions yet. Could you ask one of my questions?
One more.
Yeah. Ask one of my.
Ask one of Stevens.
Yeah. Ask the one about the police force. Or can I ask it?
Sure.
On Wednesday, you said that you worked for a year in the police force while you were in grad school. So what, was that a private or public? And
Public.
What was your title?
It was a municipal police force. I was a police officer. That's all I was.
Okay.
I worked while I was in graduate school for that year
And how did you
on
receive?
the west side of Chicago.
How did you receive your training there? And
I was trained there by the force itself.
was that?
I was assigned to the large county hospital, and I was trained by the police force themselves.
And was that the Wheaton?
Who do you care?
I'm just
What big
curious.
deal?
No, but was that for the Wheaton municipality or like what
No, it
municipality?
wasn't for Wheaton.
So
I went to Wheaton Graduate School.
where could I look that up?
You can look it up anywhere you want.
So what municipality was it though?
You look it up anywhere you want.
Can you tell me? What,
No, you look it up anywhere you want.
what municipality was it?
Next question.
Next question. This guy is looking for stuff. Just niggle stuff.
About lobbying.
Yeah.
I have a question in there about lobbying. Can you answer that question?
What about lobbying?
I'd like to hear about Saturday town halls. I asked one about Saturday town halls. Could you look for that one?
This,
Is this not a Saturday town hall?
yeah.
Wasn't very well advertised.
When you'll be bringing one to Western Washington County?
We will tell you when we're there. On scheduling, let me just make this again. We've said this before. Scheduling the Capitol Police, Secret Service, all request that we be very cautious on giving long and detailed information on our schedule.
Sure, yeah.
We had members of Congress that were shot at. One was almost killed. And we have regular threats to all of us, I believe. All of us. I've had threats of fire bombings at my house.
I'm just asking.
And so we have to be careful about that.
I understand.
We do Saturday events when we choose to do Saturday events. We do weekday events when we choose to do weekday events. It will be our choice.
I understand you can't give a particular date, but I'm just asking whether there will be one in my area fairly soon.
There may be. We've done a lot in Washtenaw County. We've done a lot in Jackson County. fact, we've done a lot in every single one of our 7 counties,
Sure,
and we'll continue doing it. Let's get one more question.
Could we thank you for something?
Well, let's take one more question. And
Okay, this question comes from John from Adrian. Do you get lobbying money to help, did you get lobbying money to help you get elected?
I got PAC dollars. I got individual dollars. All of the above. It costs money to put out ads, to send mailers out. That's part of the campaign process. My opponents generally outspend me. My last opponent outspent me. She got PAC dollars. I got PAC dollars. She got individual dollars from state, in district, and out of state, as I did as well.
That was my question.
Okay?
I feel lobbying should be illegal.
Yeah.
I feel big corporate money.
Then stop talking.
Pharmaceutical.
You're lobbying me right now. You're a lobbyist.
Money in politics.
They elect Congress and own them.
No, they don't. My constituents elected me.
Yeah, and
If
calling
you look
constituents
at my
lobbyists.
record, everything I said I would do, I'm doing.
Well, there are a lot that aren't.
Well, you don't know a lot of them. That's a statement. That's just general statement. And that's like saying it's a swamp. Yeah, the thing was built on a swamp. But if you met the people that I know, if you went to the congressional prayer breakfasts that happen every week and the Bible studies, if you met some of the spouses that were there, you'd realize they're normal people just like you and me. They're good people. They're committed public servants. And many of them have left better jobs with more pay than what they're getting now to come. And they won't be there that long. They won't serve 59 years. I'm not going to serve 59 years, I can tell you that. But just these general statements. The UAW is a lobbyist. You don't think they should be talking to me? They're in my office on a regular basis. I go meet with them here. You don't think that the Teamsters should be lobbying? I meet with them on a regular basis. You don't think that Farm Bureau should be in Washington last week talking to me about the Farm Bill? You bet they should. They represent my district as well. The key is elect somebody who won't be swayed in the wrong way by a PAC or a lobbyist. Lobbyists can be very much helpful to me. I don't want to let this out, I guess, but I don't know everything. I have to learn it day by day, and some of these lobbyists, even when I end up disagreeing with them, I've learned something. And it made me better able to make a decision. Now, if you can show that I've been bought off and my position has changed drastically from what I came in with because of a lobbyist campaign contribution, then that's a different thing. But I came in supporting the Second Amendment with an A+ record in the state legislature for the Second Amendment support. I came in pro-life. That was one of the reasons I ran for the State House of Representatives. I'm still pro-life. Do I believe in supporting agriculture? Always have, always will. Manufacturing. So when they come and talk to me, it can be invaluable to get information. But then I have to have the guts to stand up and say at times, I love you, man, but I'm not going that direction. And that's why I don't think I have a 100% voting record except with right to life and the Second Amendment. I want to say thank you. We've gone over 10, 12 minutes. We can make it without speeding, I think, to the next Monroe event. But I appreciate it. We will be back to a spot somewhere near you at some time in the district. We'll give you as much notice as the police encourage us to do. And we always enjoy having the opportunity. And again, remember, 2 things. One, we're Americans with diversity. And it always makes life better if we smile a bit, too.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for attending this afternoon session, and let's give Representative Walberg a round of applause.